Hello YouTube. This video will cover my recommendations for Focus School and some of the things I've learned when it comes to the most recent Focus rework that just occurred with Old Peace and the addition of the Tauron Strike weapons. What I will say flat out right off the start, these are very difficult to farm. It takes, if you had to estimate, anywhere from 25 to 30 missions that are about 12 to 14 minutes apiece in order for you to farm this. So each one of these is very difficult to get, but there's a workaround, and you can buy this once. I highly recommend everyone doing it because for 175 platinum, the value in that is insane. Now, if you're short on platinum, then it is what it is. If you wanted to convince someone to gift this to you, you can only get gifted one, or you can only purchase one. So you can't abuse gifting in order to get more of these. But what it gives you is at least a full set of materials for a Tauron Strike weapon, and then with what you get from the quest, you should be able to fully max out your school, assuming you have enough focus, like quantity in that school. If you've been playing for a long time, you probably have more than sufficient to max out the school. You're only limited based on the new material. So I highly recommend getting this. Like I said, it's only one per account, so you can't abuse gifting. So with that out of the way, what is my most recommended Focus School? If you had to choose one, because of how high the investment is, what I would recommend. Now, obviously, I don't have all 5 of them, or however many Focus Schools there are unlocked. Yeah, all 5 of them. I don't have all 5 of them. I have 2. And I made the mistake of first going with Naramon, which I would not recommend. I think in a melee-only build, the extra features that you get are a little redundant. So you have this colossal thing. This is very good in terms of damage output, but it runs into this simple problem that it takes so long to cast that by the time you cast this, everything's probably dead if your team isn't AFK or unless you're solo. And then the combo that you get from this really isn't necessary. And most of the melee weapons that I recommend, the ones that I use, like dual lickers, it's redundant. You're sitting there capped at max combo anyways, which is also where Naramon in general is a little redundant in the modern game when you can just put stuff on your heavy weapons. So that's the unfortunate downside here. This Spectral Blades, this doesn't last very long. They don't seem to be that useful. I don't notice a really meaningful increase in the charge rate when these proc. I don't think it's that great. Maybe it needs some tuning, but really not that useful. This just increases the range of it, and then this just makes them attack twice. Still, I don't find them very useful. So what I recommend, you can probably see, is Unairu. So Unairu has been my recommended Focus School when it comes to Excalibur, just in general, especially because most people aren't playing Prime, most people are playing Umbra, and Unairu does a great job at fixing the fundamental flaw in the core difference that I think DE should fix. If you've seen my previous video about Founders Pack, I still stand on that. It's my opinion. But this solves the major issue that you can run into, including if you're not at 400 login days, which is Prime Sure-Footed, because this is simply better than Prime Sure-Footed. It also applies to your operator. Not as impactful on your operator as it was before Old Peace, because I'll get into the mods. I believe I have all of them. We can check that. I might be missing 1 or 2. I think I'm missing 1 or 2. This is very impactful on both your operator and on your Warframe. So this is still one of the best reasons to run Unairu. Also, you get increased armor, and not only base armor, wherever that is, yeah, this guy, but also getting into some of the new affixes, you get what is effectively the same as the conversion mod. Health conversion, I think is what it's called. Let me check. It's been a while since I've actually used this. Yeah, it's the same as health conversion, the way it works. If you actually hover over what the ability is in the top right, it is in fact health conversion. It's not based on health orbs, but it's based on the same function that taking damage will consume a stack. Now, this is very important if you see my next video, or what will likely be my next video, which is some interesting stuff with the new arcanes. And one arcane that I think everyone's been curious to see how well it works. But this extra armor, including the base 200, is important. Getting into the actual strike ability, it's a big hammer. It has similar cast time and or long cast time to Naramon. I'm not sure about the rest of them, but at least those two, they seem to be comparable. The downside of this one is that you can't really aim it, so then wherever it happens to strike, it strikes. But I would argue this one is mostly to proc its effects versus Naramon, that is better. Its most useful feature is the actual damage, because it's a pretty big area, it's a pretty big hit. I still don't find it that useful, to be honest. This is probably one of the major reasons why I would recommend this school, as like if you had to choose one and you've already got this maxed out and you already have enough focus available to be able to max everything out, then just get this one, because these universal orbs are very good. Being able to drop 5 pickups, including universal ammo, is pretty good. And then the other reason why this is good, even for a melee only build, is this guy. So this shockwave effect, the important thing that you might see here, notice this is shockwaves, and this is enables their shockwave effect on your next melee slam attacks. These do in fact synergize, so this lets you not only proc this universal orb or ammo drop off of the actual Tauron Strike, but also on subsequent next 4 melee slams. And so the energy economy from this is, you do have to wait for the initial charge and initial build up, but I think in general, if your build is somewhat energy efficient, this will top you off once you actually proc it and drop a lot of very useful universal stuff. Unairu in general has been one of the best. I've gone over this in my previous videos, the ability to give your team extra amp damage. I think the general problem, or I guess myth, that my previous video about focus schools sort of busted in that context, regarding like Void Cascade and Materai and that being pseudo required, or at least what everyone considered it being pseudo required, I think that argument's basically dead now. So you can pretty much run any, like the amount of damage that you get, the amount of additional damage you get from your focus school for the next part that I'll show, I think is pretty obvious once you see it. So similar to, since we're going over focus school, I might as well cover this. This is exactly what I've run before. Virtuous Strike with a 747. This does a really good job. The primary fire does a really good job at proccing this. This is very valuable. This is also still very valuable, even with some of the mods that you get. And then because I'm running Unairu, even if I'm running something like Gloom, I still find this useful as a backup, because it's a reliable source of healing. That 300 health that you can pretty much spam if you're familiar with my strategy of that, where you transfer, quick melee, and you can pretty quickly just pop in and out of operator and spam this and survive Steel Path. So getting into the actual modding configuration, I think there's a lot of wiggle room here. So I've been running this one for largely the initial charge, but I don't necessarily know if this is that useful for Unairu. I've been primarily preferring this on Naramon, but to put in perspective, you don't hit nearly as much enemies with Unairu that you do on Naramon. So more than likely what I'll end up doing is upgrading or switching this to something else. Probably one of the most useful would be either this invisibility, because I wouldn't doubt it if you can keep this up pretty consistently in the right mission type. There's going to be some things I'll describe and some important things to know when I show some of the stats here. But just as an example, I don't think this is as fixed as it might seem. I think there's a lot of options here. This mod, I don't know, I haven't tested this yet. If this secondary weapon damage applies to your amp, I generally aren't going to use this because I don't equip secondaries, but it is what it is. I think these are pretty fluid. Whichever one you happen to prefer, just go with it. What I'll probably do just for the sake of testing is go with this guy. Because a very important thing to understand, it's very important. You notice this charge faster rate. Notice how it's 45%. The reason it's 45% is if you haven't seen this yet, I'm just going to show you. Focus lenses. So you notice this 10% bonus Tauron Strike charge rate. Very important thing to understand about this. This doesn't require a Lua one to get that 10%. You can use a base one. and it works just fine. Example. Here you go. And this does work. So notice we'll go back just so no one has to rewind. We'll go back into here and we'll show this charge rate, 45.3%. Now what I'm going to do is do what I'm normally going to do, which is unequip primaries and secondaries. And then we're going to go back into that if I remember exactly where I had to go. And there you go. So these stack. That 10% does stack. It doesn't seem to stack additively. It seems to stack multiplicatively. So you're not going to benefit from doing crazy nonsense. I will say, though, I did add a base Naramon lens to everything I possibly can. So my heavy weapon, this guy already had, I think, a Naramon, a greater Unairu, I mean. So I've just put Unairu lenses on everything, which I didn't do until very recently, because at this point, I don't see a reason not to use Naramon, even for this build. Because I will be getting into the specifics around this build. You might be able to see the subsume on it. This will be the next video. But I figured I would separate these out and sort of discuss some of those things that I've learned. So I think overall, I've really enjoyed the extra complexity. I think the mods associated with this are pretty good. I'll get back into those mods here before I close this video out and sort of discuss what I've come to prefer. I've already kind of gone over the arcanes. Don't think they matter that much. Probably one of the most significant ones is something like this. Just extra crit chance. You pretty much can't go wrong. It's also giving you crit damage if you have Zenruk. So in this case, notice how these set mods work, where at the very top it shows that this is a Naramon type mod. And you get a bonus of crit damage anytime you have a Zenruk. So then right here, here's a Zenruk. We look over at our crit damage. I got 0.2 crit damage from that. Same thing, we'll go into this Madarai school. You can look at the energy charge rate. Reduce multi-shot there. Amp recharge rate. It looks like it should. Recharge rate. There you go. So that went down. So these work. To kind of go back, a little circle back here. I'm using some of these because, like in this example, this maximum amp energy and the charge rate, I'm already using this multi-shot one, which is pretty obvious why you'd want multi-shot. And I think this one as well. This one's flexible depending on what you're doing. For me, when I look at the other versions of these, like I don't think that's as useful as, or I don't think amp status chance is as useful as just raw damage, even though I'm getting a lot of raw damage just from Unairu, at least 100. So I think diversifying this is pretty good. Same thing here. I'm using amp firing rate, and this is a Madarai school. So then I'm able to make use of this increasing the recharge rate. So just as a representation, this is how much the charge rate is going up. So it's pretty good. I think it's really just the consequence that there really isn't too many things that are better than it. If you're not running Unairu, then obviously one of the best that you can get are some of these extra utility ones, but let's see how long it takes for me to get to it. This one, if you don't run Unairu, this one's probably required because of how likely it is for your operator to get knocked down or knocked back from your own amp, depending on what amp you use. This is pretty good. I think even just the simple nature of you can proc void mode reliably with this is pretty good. I'm obviously not using it because I'm running Unairu, and Unairu has knockdown immunity for your operator. I think that's enough explanation there. Some of the other ones are good, but these are pretty easy to get. You might be able to trade some people in your clan for them. I've gotten only one spare of this, so this one might be a little rarer than the rest. They might even be cheap on Warframe Market, if they're even tradable. I don't know. I haven't tried yet. I've just played enough to be able to get almost all of them. We'll get into at least one that I would recommend trying, and I might end up... Oh, this is... Bug frame. Alright, I fixed it. I had to hit escape. and go to navigation. So we'll get into the mods that I don't have yet. So actually go to the incomplete tab because it's relatively easy to see them. I think this initial charge rate is probably going to be pretty decent. Ranked up, this should be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like to 10 or 12, whatever the math comes out to that. That's pretty good. Whether it's worth sacrificing amp damage is another story, but I'd say it's a pretty good option, especially if you can stack multiple of those. Because the charge rate, you think, with how much charge rate you get from a focus lens, that's probably not as useful overall, stacking any sort of charge rate one. The initial charge, though, is pretty good. Yeah, so it looks like I'm just missing that one. Once I get that one, I'll play with it more. Sort of recap over things. If you had to choose one, I think even if you don't run the type of gameplay that I run, the Unairu Focus School probably has the most utility out of it, being able to drop armor, being able to drop universal orbs, having a pretty good bonus effect that should be applicable to everyone. Even if you're a melee-only build, I think overall it's better school than even Naramon for a melee-only build. Now, if you get into the circuit, or if you get to your second option, I would then say get Naramon, because things like circuit, things where you don't get that increased combo duration, or the increased combo duration from like your heavy weapon. And also, if you're not using a melee weapon that just gives you insane amount of combo, then Naramon's still a pretty good option, but I think it got kind of the shorter end of the stick on utility there. So if there's any questions, if you're curious about what build this is, check out my channel, and I'll probably have that up here soon, because this is quite interesting, and there's a lot of things to talk about, and Unairu is an important part of that. Thanks for watching.